In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Here we go again. Thank you so much for all your support, all your love. We are feeling it. The community is growing. Moya writes, please remember to subscribe, like, and share so that the community can get bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm excited today. You know how I feel about women. So today we're going to unpack the role of women, and it's the season of Nomkhubulwane, but this is all going to be unpacked in today's episode by Gogo Nkanyezi. Thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted, excited, and looking forward to today's lessons.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, Ntsiki. I have been, I'm an avid follower of yours. I don't always comment on everything, but thank you for your work. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for bringing such a vibrant and fresh energy into the space. So thank you.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
When I first came into contact with your work, you were speaking about Nomkhubulwane. And we as Africans have been taught that we had African myths and legends. And it almost distances us from our spirituality and what it actually meant. Right. So can we unpack the male and the female and what it means, the moon and the sun, what it means to us, and what do you mean it's the season? Who is Nomkhubulwane?
So I'm glad that you spoke about myths and stories, because when something is a myth, it connotes that there's an element of fabrication, if you like, in there. What we're talking about when we talk about these stories that we've read about, say, the African creation story, whether that be the Kemetic African creation story or the Zulu or the Shona Karanga, these are based on cosmology. Remember that as African people, we are very close to nature. Matter of fact, our spirituality is grounded in nature. So when you say, who is Nomkhubulwane, for example, well, Nomkhubulwane is the mother archetype. Nomkhubulwane is who is represented by the moon. Nomkhubulwane is who's responsible for fertility. She's responsible for birth. She's responsible for healing. And who is the father, if you'd say? The father would be, in that case, Umvelinqangi, or Ra, right, in the Kemetic way. So if you're asking who is the counterpart to Nomkhubulwane, it would be Umvelinqangi. So Nomkhubulwane in Kemetic cosmology would be Alset, and Umvelinqangi would be Asar. So it's Asar as the sun and Nomkhubulwane as the moon. So that essentially is the dyad, if you like, mother, father. Because in African cosmology, unlike certain religions, there is an acknowledgement that there can be no child or no life without the mother, right? So the clip you may have seen was when I was saying, when we look at what is the Trinity in, say, Christianity, it's the Father, the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. And I actually said, imagine that. They'd rather have a spook or a ghost than to have a woman, than to acknowledge that a woman is who gives birth to life. So for me, Nomkhubulwane being Alset is actually, I'm a great devotee of Nomkhubulwane, because my archetype, meaning my purpose and my work in this lifetime, is the mother. is to be mother. How do I know that? Well, I'm mothering everybody. I have people in their 80s I'm mothering. I mother men, I mother women, I mother children. That is my archetype. And so Nomkhubulwane also, interestingly enough, is very close to me because since I was a child, I've always been fascinated by the moon. So I remember in the village, because I grew up partially in the village, partially in the city, and at night I would sit outside while the others played or drummed, and I would just gaze at the moon. I used to have dreams of the moon. Sometimes the moon would be falling on my bed. And when I was about 4 or 5, it used to be really frightening, or I dream of myself, surrounded by galaxies. I remember even seeing, Saturn with the ring. And I would be terrified to go to sleep. And I would not want to close my eyes because every time I closed my eyes, I would see these planets and against this black velvet sky, if you like, or backdrop. It was my spiritual journey has been quite something.
But that is what we want to get at, because I need to, as a person, you don't suddenly, like, when you're older, become spiritual.
Right.
It's from when you were young.
Yeah.
So we're happy you have a platform to tell us about your upbringing and how your spirituality played out. And
yeah. So I grew up Roman Catholic, and I was one of those very devoted kind of Roman Catholic. By nature, I tend to be an all or nothing person. So when I put myself in something, it's 300%. And so I was devoted. We went to church every Sunday. If my mother couldn't take us to church for whatever reason, I would walk 10 Ks to go to church. That's how devoted I was. 12 years old, I would do 6 to 6 fasts in the church. I would ask the priest to lock me in there and just leave me in there with my Bible. There was a hunger, there was a yearning for something that I couldn't quite identify. Now, that used to happen when I was in the city during the school term. And every holiday, my parents shipped us off to the village, where it was a totally different ball game, because now I was in a place where there was drumming, where there were certain amasiko or cultural traditions and rituals that were done within the compound, within the family, and I took part in those as well. And they fascinated me, and I've always loved the drum, and I would dance myself into a frenzy. I loved nature, so I had this dual upbringing where, when I was in school, we were learning from books the whole time, right? Here is a cricket, or here is a termite, label its parts. Well, when I was in the village, we would catch these crickets and locusts, and we would dismember them, and we learned their body parts by dismembering them and by asking, what part is this, what part is that? So I had both this theoretical way of learning things, which to me is quite useless, and then I had this practical way of learning things where I was immersed in nature and learning things. So I think that spiritually, I'm a trained Sangoma, basically ngatwasa, meaning that I was initiated in the Ubungoma tradition. But my initiation came as a last step to a very long journey that I didn't fully understand. So when I was younger, I always tell this story, and people are like, what? I got stopped from going to the river because I would go to the river, and I was fascinated because I would look in the water and I would see cows, people, beads, goats, and I would be so hypnotized that I would most times be caught as I was about to fall in. Or one of my cousins told my grandmother that this kept happening every single time we went to wash clothes, and then I was banned from going to the rivers, which was really painful because I had no idea why I was being stopped from going to the rivers. I loved that place. But my grandmother knew that something was going on. And you have to remember that at that time, we did have inyanga or healers. In Zimbabwe, they're not called sangomas. they are called either two things. They're called shikiro, which is a spirit medium, or they are called nganga, which is inyanga, those who work with herbs. There were plenty around, but they were kind of marginalized, you know, and I later on found out that, of course, the 1950 Anti-Witchcraft Act and people sort of scuttling and not being allowed to practice this way of healing, if you like, and people going into churches and these so-called African spiritual churches being born. I learned that later on, that is why, even though members of my family saw that I was ancestrally gifted, they tried very much to do away with it. Which is probably why I was thrown into church. But, you know, spirit is so powerful. I actually believe that I was in the church for that long, and I grew and I was protected within that space. You can't box Moya, you know.
So I actually want more of that story, because you've gone from the young. So now, as you're getting older, because I mean, we live in a world that can make you question, and there's a lot of pressure to be Christian. So how did you navigate to eventually get to where you are?
Right. So as I was growing up, one of the times in my life I had a crisis was when I was about 11, right? So in school, we were taught about this Jesus Christ. Yeah. And we were taught that a man must only have one wife. Meanwhile, my grandfather in the village has 5. So I had 5 grandmothers. So now I'm stuck here, and I'm like, and I loved all my grandmothers, and I loved all my cousins. We had huge homestead. And so I had a crisis, because here I was at school being told that only the first wife mattered, all the others were concubines, and that all my cousins and aunties who came from the other wives were bastards. That for me was one of the most painful things. In school, we were taught that you don't kneel in front of anyone except God. I knelt in front of all my elders when I greeted them. So now there was this whole crisis going on. What was I to believe? And to be quite honest, I don't think it really resolved itself until I was much older. Yeah. Because I went to Catholic school. So until I was about 18, I was very much immersed in Catholicism. There's nothing you can tell me about the Catholic Church. I know all I'm properly indoctrinated. I left home. I left Zimbabwe at 18. And I went to Germany. And that is the first time I was like, is not make sure. We've been fed a lie, because the churches were empty. The churches were empty. They're museums. You know, I lived in a village called Reimlingen, a tiny little village. People would go to mass, and it was only the old people, and we'd be in there, in and out in 10 minutes. The mass was so quick. There was no drumming, there was no music, no nothing. It was sterile. I remember sitting in a church and saying, God, where are you? Like, where are you? I was 18 at that time. And so I stopped going to church, because it was pointless for me. And then that's when I realized that actually what drew me to church was community when I was younger. It was the music and the drumming. Because although it was Catholic, we drummed in church. Shona drums. We danced in church. It wasn't a sort of European sort of church. And so I realized that, no, man, something is not okay. Why are these people not as devout as we are, and yet they were the missionaries who came and brought us this thing? So I started thinking. So, you know, I stopped that church thing. I just stopped. As I grew older, so I was in Germany for a couple of years. Then I went to Scotland, where I stayed for 7 years. I studied medical biochemistry. And in that time, I was fascinated by tarot. So I was in Glasgow, which was like a goth town. You know, everybody was in black lipstick, Doc Marten boots, you know, just, and there were lots of these kind of spiritual little shops around. And I bought a set of tarot cards, and a friend of mine gave me a set as well as a gift. And I could read tarot like I didn't understand. Then I started remembering, this is devilish. What I'm doing here is demonic, because remember, the Bible says you will not do any divination. You won't do any of that stuff. this thing pulled me. Like I could not help it. And once I overcame the fear of hell, because again, things just stopped making sense because I was like, yeah, you know what, smite me already. Let's see. There was no thunderbolts that came after me. And I certainly didn't see a red creature with a forked tail and a pitchfork waiting to roast me. Didn't see any of that. So I was like, you know what, whatever. But tarot pulled me. Tarot really pulled me. And so I would do readings. I would read people. Then, interestingly enough, it got to a point where I could sit with somebody and I could just tell them their things. Hey, and I'm like, what is going on with me? Very calmly, just like I'm sitting with you. I could just tell. I could tell when people were lying to me. I didn't necessarily always embarrass them, but I could tell when I was being lied to. I used to dream a lot, and I used to dream things that would happen, or I'd get warning dreams, as I called them, where, for example, I would dream and I would wake up and I'd call my brother in South Africa and I'd say, Dennis, don't drive your trucks to the border. And my family had by that time started to believe me. And he wouldn't question, just say, oh, okay, actually I was intending to drive to Zambia. My driver, and I'm like, no, keep parked. Then later on he'd call me and say, guess what? Some xenophobic attacks at all the borders. So yeah, thank you. Do you see? And I didn't know where all that was coming from. Fast forward now, I'm in America. I'm married. I've had 4 beautiful girls. There's a set of twins in there, my last. And I got sick. I was diagnosed with what they called fibromyalgia. I was put on like 8 to 10 different medications, antidepressants, muscle relaxants. Basically, I was really ill for about 3 years. I was not okay. What got me out of that, here's the kicker. I'm sure my ancestors thought this one is dumb. We're going to need to help her out a bit. Because I knew nothing about nothing. My mom didn't either. I just was sick, and everybody attributed it to my twin pregnancy because that pregnancy was so difficult. And they, even the doctors were like, this is probably what triggered the nerve pain and the back pain and the what. Meanwhile, it is the call. The calling is calling. So what ended up happening was I had a dream. And in this dream, I was shown black and white beads. And it was 11 white, 11 black. That was the sequence. I got my mom to go to an art store to get some beads. And I remember telling her, please, not plastic, just make them glass beads. She made this long thingy. I put it on me. I wasn't instructed by anyone, didn't know anything about sangomas or bunyanga. By that evening, I was out of my bed and I was walking around. That's when I was like, these beads, what is going on? So that then began the journey to understanding my gift and what was actually going on with me. So note, I had been working all this time using this gift without actually acknowledging where this gift came from, without even knowing that it was a special gift. I just thought I was weird. Seriously. I just thought I was weird. But throughout that time, like when I was in school for those 6-7 years I was in Glasgow, I had really strange encounters with people who tell me weird things about myself. And this is where Kemet comes in, because I remember once going to Basel, Switzerland to visit a friend. And in a church, no less, a Franciscan friar comes up to me. The friars, like the brothers, right, with the little bald head. And then he looked at me and he said, in your former life, you were so powerful. It's just great that in this incarnation, you're a woman, not a man. Right? Waham. So my friend comes in. We'd been taking pictures. And I said, where did that Franciscan brother go? Because I have questions for him. She's like, what Franciscan? So I said, no, there was a Franciscan here who said this. And he said, I must take care of you. She was half Senegalese, half Swiss, and she was struggling. He said, I must take care of you. He's like, Barbara, there have been no Franciscans here in this place for the last 30 years. This is a museum. I'm like, no, man. I spoke. So those kind of weird things would happen to me. And I saw the guy and I talked to him. Right? Anyway, fast forward. Then the journey began. So it was 2020, COVID hit. Yes, the COVID did a lot for a lot of us, right? That is when I stumbled upon a video of my Gobela and the Ankh. And I'd been fascinated by the Ankh since I was little. Since, remember Salt and Pepper?
Yes.
Yes. Remember the Ankhs? Since that time, I was just fascinated by Ankh. I didn't understand it. I'm a medical person, so I thought, what's a female symbol, right? Go figure. Maybe that's what draws me, because I was also a rah-rah feminist. So I was like, boy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Sorry. So then I was told very clearly that this guy was the person who was to facilitate my stuff. I started watching a few videos, Umguni, this, that. It kind of made some sense on some level, but on another it didn't. Anyway, I ended up at Phehlweni during COVID, lockdown, locked in Phehlweni. And the rest is history. Ngatwasa, Puzangalpalaza. And the fascinating part of my journey has been what's been happening since then. Because I'm becoming more and more aware that I have been in initiation school for a very long time. Because when I was 20 and in the UK, I had dreams of this place with huge, huge stones. Then I see a picture of Stonehenge. I'm like, these stones. So I ended up with a Catholic group, by the way, at Stonehenge. I have photographs, 20. After I came out of Phehlweni, I started having dreams about big stones again. I'm like, hey, what is these big stones? Then it was probably 2 years after I twasad, April last year actually, a dream came and I was told that I needed to go to South Africa. So I figured, okay, there were a few things I needed to do for my ancestors. Maybe this was it. I needed to do it at home. I assumed that I would get to Joburg and some of my siblings would help me with this process. We get to Joburg. That night we got there, had a dream that we were to exit Joburg the very next day and head to Limpopo. Limpopo, how? Turns out one of my siblings that I twasad with is from Limpopo. But at the time, he was supposed to be in Mpumalanga doing something else. So when we got to Limpopo, it's like, so you are the reason that I had this dream that I needed to head back here. I'm supposed to be in Mpumalanga doing XYZ. Well, he facilitated that process. This is when Umkhulu Inkosi lo Ongphethe came through. And he spoke and he introduced himself. He asked for the things he wanted. And he explained that he didn't show up at Phehlweni because he was not going to gobela anybody. He was not going to bow to anyone. So instead, my grandmother is who came through when I was at Phehlweni. Fascinating stuff.
Right. There's a lot of feminine, even in your chats, you mentioned, because you didn't mention your grandfathers, you mentioned your grandmothers, your 5 grandmothers, then you mentioned your daughters. So your relationship with this feminine energy.
Very, very powerful. And I'll tell you something that'll make you laugh. So, although I was Christian, I never believed God was a man. Yeah. I would do the Our Father, the this, the this, but my image in my head of God was always mother. So my journey with the divine feminine has been, I think, I don't know, maybe before even I was born. Because all my work, I'm 50 now, but my entire life's work, if you were to say, okay, give us a portfolio of everything you've done, has been in service of women and girls. Like I said to you, I was a feminist at some point. You know V-Day, right? V-Day, Vagina Monologues.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I worked with V-Day for a couple of years. Again, in service of women, anti-violence against women, sexual violence, femicide, all that stuff. I've written a lot about it as well. But the interesting thing was, for me, there was always this thing that said, why aren't we making any headway in this thing, this violence against women? Yeah. If anything, it seems to be escalating and getting worse. Yeah. What are we missing? And I think it took it took my own personal spiritual journey to be able to say, wait a minute, this is the missing link. Because the truth be told, we are so out of balance. We are so sick. We have taken in norms and behaviors that have nothing to do with Ubuntu Betu. And this is why we are the way we are. And therefore, the solution for us lies where? In going back and tracking how were things done at a time that was more harmonious than what we have now. And that could only have been pre-colonial times. Because anything post-colonial is tainted, is distorted, and does not do service to us as Abantu. It really doesn't. So that for me was the final click. So when I saw your video with Umkhulu Nkanyezi on unpopular opinion, I had figured out that we as Black people, as Black African people, could not get out of the mess we were in based on the methods that we were using. So all this activity around violence against women, the political structures. In fact, I just written a piece about how somebody said, can you write a piece as a spiritual person about, what is this, Africa, is called Unity Day, the African Unity Day. Some day, man, where we commemorate.
Africa Day.
Yeah, you're not there. And what I'd written a piece, and in it I'd said, the way I see things, this is not working for us. Because what has the African Union actually done for Africa? It's a toothless bulldog. They are disorganized. And then I wrote in that piece that actually the way I see it, we need to go back to the way things were. We need to go back to royal households. The role of women was central to this. And I'm telling you right now, the reason why the world is sick is because of abuse of women. And this is demonstrated in the way we've abused Mother Earth as well. We've raped, we've plundered her, we've dug up things, and we've caused such a misalignment on planet or Mother Earth herself. And it's indicative in how we're treating women, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. So the divine feminine for me, and not that I place the divine feminine above the masculine, no. But, and people sometimes accuse me of doing that. They say you're placing women above men and stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm actually placing women in their rightful place. And if you perceive that to be above men, that's not my problem. What I know for sure is that we are lacking in balance, and therefore we're lacking in harmony as men and as women. And what has brought us to this dis-ease is the way in which we're treating women. That's just facts.
What is the role of women?
Indlovukazi. What is Indlovukazi? You just need to look into the elephant kingdom. And I always say, you know what? I'm like, this is so disingenuous. AmaZulu knew. People know the role of women. It just doesn't serve them currently to admit it. Because where does the term Indlovukazi come from? If you look at the matriarchal elephant, if you go into any herd, it's led by a matriarch. Any herd of elephant is led by a matriarch. What are the qualities of Indlovukazi? She gets to pick who she mates with based on certain criteria that she chooses. She doesn't have to stick with one mate her entire life if she doesn't want to. She can switch them up. She is in charge of the children. Matter of fact, the children are hers. So this whole paternal inheritance of children and the surname, this is all white people nonsense. That's why when we patla, and I teach this all the time, you start with your mother's side, because that's a sure side. Everybody knows their mother. I mean, God, she carried you, right? That is really where your protection and a lot of your blessings come from. The paternal is not make sure You could be calling a surname that's not yours, because really, the Shona have a saying, "Munu wega nozia baba bemwana ndimai," meaning the only person who knows the father of a child is the mother. There's a reason these sayings are there. Right? So where we are now is really, I like spirituality. For me is a very practical thing. Where we are now, as I look at things, and that's why you fascinate me so much, especially when people attack you for being a feminist, because I'd love to jump in the fray, but Twitter and its few characters doesn't allow, and it just, things just get out of control. But the reason I say you fascinate me is because, and even the responses you get is, you stick and you are very clear about your stance as a feminist. And I love and I respect that. But that doesn't also take away from the fact that, feminism is not inherently African. The question I'm always asking people who criticize you is, why aren't we looking at why African women decided to adopt feminism? What had happened that caused African women to adopt feminism? And I will never knock feminism for one reason. Because I know that in Zimbabwe, for example, it was through the feminist movement that women could have right to own land. It was through the feminist movement that laws and bills were passed to prevent child marriage. Bills were passed to ensure that young girls didn't get married at 12 and 13 and start having children and having fistula and all sorts of things, because 12-year-old body is not ready to carry a pregnancy to full term. It stopped young girls being married off to men in their 70s who are old enough to be their great-grandfather, right? So for me, yes, it is a white construct, and if we are saying we want to move back to a space and a place where there was harmony and balance between the divine masculine and the feminine, then there would be no need for feminism. Yeah. That's what people don't get that. Feminism came out of a dire need. Women were dying and still are dying. Yeah. And the only people I see making a noise about the death of women are feminists. So I come from that movement. 1 in 9. I know all, in fact, I know all my comrades. I'm sure they watch me now and they're like, "Oh, what happened, comrade?" But my point being that unless we get into balance, number one, we're not going to achieve Black unity, which we all know we need if we're ever going to get anything back that was taken from us. And number two, we're going to continue to be sick the way we are. We are not well as a people. Just go on social media and see some of the things people write. See some of the way people relate. Asina Ubuntu. We've lost Ubuntu. Ubuntu has become such an abstract concept to us rather than being a way of being and a way of life. We're horrible to one another. So mean. We're horrible to one another. Even in the work that we're doing of trying to teach and educate and raise consciousness in Black people, it's Black people who attack you the worst. It's Black people who undermine your work, who undercut you. It's Black people who have this toxic competition. I'm like, my gosh, we have so much work to do. Let's all do this work. Why? And this thing that we have, this individualism and me in my small corner, as long as I'm doing okay, then,
this corporate lifestyle where you just take care of yourself and then you don't have enough money for family, whatever, because you've got to pay your bond, which is 100,000 million. Your car's also 500,000 million.
Yeah, so you have this illusion that you're wealthy when in actual fact you're not. You're just living off of debt, right? You buy your groceries on a credit card. You've got the car note to pay. You've got the bond. You have basically imprisoned and chained to that house for 20 years until you pay that bond off. So it's an illusion of wealth when in actual fact, we don't have real wealth. Because for me as an African person, I've come to realize that for me, wealth lies in the land. Yeah. Wealth lies in our soil. Wealth lies in community. Wealth lies in sharing. That is where wealth lies for me. Wealth lies in being able to venerate my ancestors, to do the rituals that I need to do. That is where wealth lies, not in these pieces of paper that aren't backed by anything most times. They're not, right? It's a piece of paper, but these pieces of paper have gotten us going crazy. And it's all an illusion, and it's all this white construction that we are all, and we're drowning in it because it's not our thing, and therefore we don't even know how to navigate it properly.
So most of us are trying know how to navigate it. They grow in a collective. Look at the Jewish community. White capital monopoly. They're doing it with themselves. The Indian community is growing themselves. The Pakistanis are growing themselves. Then it's us.
And they're growing themselves, and we're growing them. Because where do we spend our dollars? How many of us actually support Black-owned businesses? Like consciously say, I refuse to spend my money anywhere other than Black-owned businesses. Instead, what we do is we criticize each other. Why? Okay, so some people say, oh, service delivery is so poor. Good, let's talk about that then. Let's not abandon ship just because service delivery is poor. How about we help Black business owners for service delivery, customer service, presentation, branding, everything else to be on point?
The reason other people got on point is because of trial and error, though.
Yeah, boy.
Because they kept going.
But the support was not removed.
Yeah.
We remove support and then we go and find the Indian or the Chinese or the white person to spend our money. It's tragic. And we're the only group that does this. It's scary. We're the only group that does this and perpetuates this. And yet we come from, if you like, we literally have created and sustained so-called civilizations of other groups of humans on this planet.
Yeah.
So there's this thing where, we do this work where we get attacked because, you're anti-Christian, you're doing this, you're burning Bibles. I always say to people, if you understood the damage that has been done by that book and those who brought it, just maybe you might have just a small enough amount of anger to realize that you don't want to have anything to do with this toxic stuff. So for me, I think there's so many things that point to how diseased we are. We're not well. But my main thing that I see as the biggest stumbling block is this divide between men and women.
How do we get men to revere women like they used to? Because now we've been objectified and sexualized. And
the thing is, they've been a part of it.
Yeah.
So, look, this is not about pointing fingers and blaming anyone. We're all in this mess together, so we all have to figure out a way out of it together. So sometimes somebody puts a post which literally will say something like, the abuse of women, blah, blah, blah. Or a post. Just recently on Facebook, I put a post about women coming into their own. Ndlovukazi, are you ready to take your rightful place? And somebody wrote, yeah, man, that's nonsense. Look at the women of nowadays and this and this and this. And that is futile to me, because what that says to me is you want to stay stuck where you are. You're not actually one of the people who's looking for solutions and looking for a way to grow. Our reminding ourselves as women of who we are as African women is absolutely essential to us healing ourselves so we can take our rightful place. And we're taking it. You understand me? We're not waiting for anyone to give it to us. That's why I'm like, Nomkhubulwane is working so closely. We're in the age of Aquarius. We're in this time of Nomkhubulwane, who is Uma, who is Indlovukazi of all Ndlovukazis. We are her daughters. She's heartful with everything that has happened with women. And we've had lots of messages coming through various people, men included, to say she's enough. She's enough of how women are treated in the spiritual space, which she says quite clearly is not the realm of men. It is the realm of the feminine. So they are actually imposters, and then they are in Ubungoma, you've got Gobela sleeping with Matwasanes, you've got, initiates being manipulated. She's hurtful with men and their crap, basically. She's hurtful with women crying every night because men do terrible things like cheat, rape, beat. She's enough. So what we're in right now is a phase where women rising to their power and connecting with Nomkhubulwane, this moon energy, particularly at certain times. New moon, full moon are the main ones. And doing rituals. What
do you mean for those of us who are babies in this? When you say rituals for the moon, what do you mean and what do they represent?
Okay, so put it this way. When we talk of Nomkhubulwane, right, we're talking about a cosmic body.
Yeah.
We're talking about the moon. Now, what else do we know based on African spirituality is that these cosmic bodies are conscious, right? So I can talk to the moon and she can respond to me because she is conscious, as above, so below. The same way I'm conscious, she's conscious. We're made of the same stuff. Matter of fact, she's responsible for the creation of all life on earth. How? If you take Asa, right? The sun. If we had the sun directly onto earth, nothing would exist. Everything would be shriveled up and burnt to ashes.
Yeah.
Who controls the amount of radiation that comes through onto earth in order for life to happen is the moon, Nomkhubulwane. She's the controller. And as she filters the sun's energy, she creates certain frequencies. This is now sort of chemetic science. And these certain frequencies are what is responsible for you sitting there and talking to me being here, this plant being there, and so on. So all life on earth happens through the moon, Nomkhubulwane. That's how important she is. She's responsible for you being knitted in your mother's womb. If you watch that video that I did, maybe you didn't see the clip where I explain that. There are 9 basic energies that are responsible, and these are the 9 basic months also that are responsible for the creation of a human being. And all of these frequencies are coming from Nomkhubulwane.
Sure, please unpack that for us.
Basically, like I've said, right, she filters the electromagnetic, it's actually the electric energy that comes from the sun. She's magnetic. So by the time that energy is filtered through, what comes to earth is electromagnetic energy, which is of varying frequencies. Mm-hmm. And these varying frequencies are what creates you. So one frequency might be responsible for your liver, your lungs, your kidneys. Another frequency is responsible for your hands, for your eyes. Do you see what I mean? So there are various frequencies that are responsible for the creation of you and all other life on earth as well. I just use you as an example because it's just so powerful to imagine that. So I always joke, like, if Nomkhubulwane decided today that, you know what, I'm cutting off one of these frequencies that you need to exist, that's the end of you. So she's a conscious cosmic body, meaning when we cry, she hears. Right? When we speak, when we patla, she hears. We patla to her. When I do my rituals, I call on her energy and I do them under her moonlight. She's watching me as I do this.
How come our wombs get sore, like when there's a full moon? How come we can feel it?
Because you're an extension of Nomkhubulwane. Right? She's mother. And a lot of people go through different things during the moon phase. And I share tips on how you can sort of mitigate or minimize how the moon affects you. Also remember that we are like 70% water.
Yeah.
It's also feminine, right? And so the moon, if you know that the moon is responsible for the tides of the ocean, right? So that same way the moon pulls and pushes water in the oceans, she pulls and pushes water within your body. And so sometimes the discomfort you're feeling is that movement of water in your cells. Now, as a woman, even more beautiful is the fact that the lunar cycle is a 28-day cycle. Our menstrual cycle is a 28-day cycle. How are we different from Nomkhubulwane? We are pure manifestations of Nomkhubulwane, Indlovukazi. And so I was laughing when I was coming here. I was like, I should tell her about the Libombo bone. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So Libombo is a range of mountains. I forget where it is. I think it's somewhere in Eswatini. And a bone was discovered. It's a fibula, a thigh bone of a baboon. And on it are etched 29 like little slots. And it is the oldest mathematical instrument on earth. And guess who the oldest mathematicians on earth are? Of course. Because this bone was used to kind of chart your days based on the moon, to chart your lunar cycle. That's why family planning was a very natural thing. You knew that, you know what, at a certain time, 2 weeks after my menstrual period, I'm fine. 2 weeks after I start ovulating, and I need to be careful for about 2 or 3 days because in that time I can get pregnant. And then after that, it kind of tails off. I'm not that fertile anymore and I'm okay. This is ancient wisdom that our ancestors, as I call them, ANSISTERS, they had this. So when it comes to working with the moon, we've been doing it. We just, what's more? We just got cut away from it. We're very much people of nature. And it was always understood who and what the moon was in relation to women. And so it goes back to our brokenness again, how men relate to women vis-a-vis their menstrual cycle. You know, we get told in spiritual spaces that you are dirty when you're menstruating. Well, that's just a Victorian nonsense thing, because ancestrally that's not accurate. It was very well known that women are most powerfully spiritual when they're menstruating. This is when you can do your most powerful magic. And Nomkhubulwane is the master magician. Meaning to say, heka, I mafunutu butagati, call it what you want, but you can do things that are pretty phenomenal as a woman when you have your period. That's the reason they said you're dirty, don't go into spiritual places, don't do this, don't do that. Men, because they knew that fact. It's got nothing to do with dirt or anything else, because you're not dirty. It's actually a very, very special time for women. And I really would urge all women during this time of Nomkhubulwane and this age of Aquarius to really get in touch with your body, understand your menstrual cycle, understand how it relates to the moon cycle. You're not always going to be in sync in terms of, me and my daughters are usually in sync so that full moon, we're all menstruating. We all live in the same house, so everybody goes at the same time. But it's not necessarily going to be that way for everybody. But you can still work with the moon energies and with your own cycle to manifest the things that you want to manifest, because Nomkhubulwane, being called the master magician, is really talking about her powers to help you manifest. So, for example, this season of Nomkhubulwane, we're coming to the end of it. 23rd, we're coming out of it. However, in the southern hemisphere, because it is winter, remember we did Isililo ska Nomkhubulwane, where Nomkhubulwane was crying because Asa was going to the northern hemisphere, right? Meaning, as long as the sun is predominantly in the northern hemisphere, the powerful and prevailing energy in the southern hemisphere is Nomkhubulwane. So winter is a time for going inward. Winter is a time for manifesting. We're not harvesting in winter, right? We're not really planting anything in winter. Therefore, physicality, doing things in winter is less. Most people want to hibernate in the winter and eat comfort food. It's very natural because winter is for that. But it's also time for going inward and doing a lot of meditative work. This is the time you can use to do your manifestation, your most powerful manifestation work. Because you have the support of the master magician herself, Nomkhubulwane. She's the prevailing energy here. And get this. Let's put some science in there. Show you how beautiful. We know that the sun produces a lot of hydrogen, right? Hydrogen. Yeah. Okay, now the sun is on the other side, in the northern hemisphere. We are left with Nomkhubulwane, predominantly oxygen, right? Here's the thing. When you're meditating, what are you being told to do? Breathe. So she supports your meditation. She supports your yoga. She's going to support your healing, because most of us are actually sick because we're not breathing properly. Yes. So please, can you breathe this winter, guys? Please. Breathe deep breaths in and out, because the prevailing element right now in the southern hemisphere is oxygen.
Moya. Beautiful way to end our episode.
And it's ended. Oh,
it's like that. You're gonna have to come again. You're gonna have to come again.
Wow, this is beautiful.
Thank you, Gogo Nkanyezi.
No, what an honor. What an honor.
Things to unpack, and we will do our full moon and new moon rituals.
Yes, please do those. And ask for the things that you really, really desire. Remember, emotion is energy in motion. So it's not just about wanting something here. It's about desiring it, longing for it. That's what she responds to. Your emotions, which is energy in motion. Togoza. Thank you.
Moya right, Moya upright. You know how it is. We only bring you the best. Please like, subscribe, share. Let's grow the community. Thank you guys for all your support. Love and light. See you next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into it off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements, while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are, and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.